Welcome to part 2 of my chat with Tish Times. She told you about one of the significant turning points in her life and in her business, losing it all, hitting rock bottom, and coming back was not easy. I'm María Tomás-Keegan, your host for From Upside Down to Right Side Up, and I'm honored to share inspiring stories like Tish's, and because these stories are stories of reaching out and rising up, and they help us all to know that we are not alone when our life turns upside down. Thank you so much, Tish, for being here, for being vulnerable and transparent.
Absolutely.
Emotions, yeah, thanks. Emotions are the topic today. I have a 2-part question for you. Okay. Would you tell us a bit about the emotional upheaval and how you were able to move from such a low place to a place of strength where you are today? And then I'm also curious about how confidence became the foundation. It's like your platform today. How did that happen?
Well, Maria, it's interesting. In the last segment, we talked a little bit about how people might perceive me, the way I walk into a room and how they might make assumptions on me having always been this confident person. Well, I remember during the time when I was going through this major upheaval in my life, I still had to go see clients. I still was out networking. In some cases, I was still out speaking. And I think on some level, without meaning to, it wasn't intentional, I had developed this air of, a public success. And when I would go into my office, I literally remember going into my office, closing the door, and almost like my head in my hands going, what am I doing? What do I do next? Not knowing what to do and knowing that things were crumbling around me, but no one knew it, not even my husband. There were bits and pieces he knew, but there was this part of me that felt like I had to keep it all together. I had to continue to wear this facade that was literally choking the life out of me. And when it all kind of came to a head, it was right before Christmas, and we were at home, and the doorbell rang. And my boys were probably, maybe 10 and 12-ish. They were young teens, preteens age. And the doorbell rang, and one of them went to the door, and I was getting ready because we were going to a family gathering, and I heard all this commotion. And at the door was Fox News, and they wanted to ask questions about what had happened with the business and how was I going to pay all these employees. Remember, this is a staffing company, so I had hundreds of employees who, because of I had a client that basically just didn't pay us. We were owed several $1,000s. They didn't pay us. They ended up coming up on charges. Long story there. And so they never paid us, and I now couldn't pay my employees. And so when my children answered the door and the news was there, and then I had, there was no more hiding it at that point, right? There was no more trying to appear like I had it all together. That was like the beginning of the crumble. But that being said, when I began to open up and let people in, and ask for help and share, because I would spend lots of time alone trying to figure it out. I got really good at trying to figure it out and never could figure it out. And so when I reached out when I shared and opened up with my husband, when I reached out and found mentors who were already in my life, but I thought I had to impress them also and appear perfect before them also, and began to let people in, that was the beginning of the road back to me being able to rebuild and to grow and to make that shift. And at that time, I had no confidence. You talk about shame, going from being literally featured in major publications and looking like you have it all together to being featured now for everything falling apart. I stayed in hiding for almost 2 years. I mean, I was literally in a functional depression for a very long time. And I had to learn how to live in a place of confidence outside of my apparent success. So my confidence had to come from within and not from all the external things, all of the material things, all of the things I thought meant confidence. So now I am literally on a mission to help women to build confidence from the inside out, not feeling like someone has to tell them who they are. They have to acquire a certain level of accomplishments, have to make a certain amount of money. And that's why confidence has become such a big platform of my business.
Mm. You're right. There is so much of this story that I want to probe more deeply on, and we promised to do these short segments in this show. But I know that you have learned a lot of lessons. So you touch on shame, you touch on depression. I'm sure we could go much more deeply into those. But I just want to ask you one question before we move on. How were you able to continue to show up for your family when everything around you that in your mind at the time equated to your success? How did that work for you?
I'll be honest, I wish I could tell you that I was able to pull it all together and be a great mom and a great wife. I wasn't, because in all of this upheaval, and I was mistaken. My kids weren't young teenagers; they were older teenagers, because one of them was getting ready to go away to college. And so when all of this happened and we lost our home, I had a son that was literally like moving out at that point. And it was difficult trying to be there for him. And then I had a young son at the time, and my oldest son. It was very difficult. I don't think I did a good job. They may disagree. They may or may not have seen things the way I see them. I don't think I did a good job. I think that I spent a lot of time introspective, still trying to figure things out at that particular time. But what I did learn, and it took several years, it was not an overnight thing, was how to communicate with vulnerability. And that's probably been, I'm trying to say this without crying, because I think the biggest shift for my family has been me being able to say, I'm not okay. I need you, and you know what I mean, in a way that I didn't need you before. I know I've always tried to hold it together and be the one who was resourceful and pull it all, whatever was going on, make it all good. I can't do that right now. And I do remember having deep conversations with my boys around what was really going on shortly thereafter my dad passed. And so we're dealing with, the loss of the business, and I'm dealing with the loss of my father, and my mother has been bedridden for many, many years. So there was a lot going on, but the one thing I remember out of all of that was sitting in a room and telling my boys how I really felt, what was really going on, and apologizing to them for how I was showing up or maybe was not showing up during that time. And that has made a huge shift for us. I think there's still places where we have to still rebuild with my older boys for sure, but it's made me, no doubt, a better mom to my youngest son, who is, has been with us the longest through this, because I don't feel like I have to be super mom or super wife. With my husband, the same thing. I think the level of openness and vulnerability, although he's always been able to show up for me, he's been great. That part of our life almost wrecked our marriage. It absolutely did. And it wasn't because I wasn't making more money anymore. It was because I was holding back and I was shutting down and I wasn't letting him in. And so that ability to now communicate with, literally like opening up, peeling back the onion and letting them in, that changed our family forever, no doubt.
That is such an important point that you make, because when we are hurting, all of us human beings, when we hurt, I think our normal tendency is to shut down, to become introspective, to, I call it, put on a mask, maybe even a suit of armor, and pretend that everything is okay. And that becomes very confining, and it becomes hard to maintain, because as human beings, that's not how we're designed. So the lesson you just shared, and we're going to get into more lessons in the next segment, but the lesson you just shared is to allow yourself to just take that mask off for a while. Be with trusted people you trust, people who love you, and share it. And it lifts a burden that is, it opens your heart. It allows for possibilities to come through. Yeah, that's an important, really important point. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Okay, I am so looking forward to what you're going to share in the next segment, because if we're paying attention to our journey, there are beautiful lessons to learn, right?
Absolutely.
And I know we're going to hear some of those, the biggest lessons from you, Tish, and then get some tips about showing up with confidence in our own lives from the inside out. So I'm María Tomás-Keegan. Stay tuned. Till next time.